My sister didn't merely spoil the unboxing of my debut novel, she stripped away a milestone I had spent a lifetime earning. When the weight of her betrayal finally broke me, she didn't offer comfort, only a cold, callous shrug. "Stop being so dramatic," she muttered, her indifference cutting deeper than the act itself. "You can always write another book." But the thing was, this wasn't the first accident involving her. She'd accidentally leaked my pen name on Instagram before I was ready to go public. She'd accidentally forwarded my rough, unedited drafts to our highly critical aunt before I'd even shown my own agent. There was always a reason. Always an apology, always a shrug. So, when my publisher sent the first physical author copies of my thriller novel, we made her promise out loud that there would be no drama. My fiancé and I gathered our closest friends in the living room to watch me open the sealed box. I had the scissors in hand, ready to finally hold my life's work for the very first time. But just as my fiancé hit record on his phone, my sister lunged forward for a better lighting angle, violently knocking a full glass of red wine onto the coffee table. The wine flooded the cardboard, soaking rapidly through the seams. Before anyone could react, she ripped the soggy flaps open, grabbed the only undamaged hardcover, and screamed, "The protagonist dies." I read the back. "He dies." She spun around and hugged my fiancé, jumping up and down, while I stood holding scissors over a box of ruined pages. 4 years I'd spent bleeding over that manuscript, dreaming of the exact moment I'd finally hold the pristine copy. She took it. Not just the physical book, the moment. She held it first, spoiled the ending, and turned the whole thing into her hugging my partner while I stood forgotten in my own apartment. I was furious and crying, and I told her to leave, but my family instantly jumped in to defend her. "Your sister is just an enthusiastic reader," my mother said. I turned to her. "Apologize," I demanded through tears. She rolled her eyes. "I already said sorry about the wine." "Look how awkward you're making everyone feel," she said, acting like the victim. I tried to explain that an author only gets one debut unboxing, that I'd never get that milestone back. She cut me off. "Fine, I'm sorry. I'm just excited about you being a real author while you're being a massive diva. You can always write another book." Then my mother smiled tightly. "She supported you when you were completely broke. You should honestly be grateful she cares." So, I walked away. I'd gotten my fake apology, and I decided to take the high road. I shouldn't have been so forgiving, because playing nice just gave her a free pass. The next week, I found out she had self-appointed herself event coordinator for my official launch party at the Hawthorne bookstore. She hadn't asked my publisher or texted me. She just started changing the itinerary. A quiet Q&A became a loud cocktail mixer, the acoustic playlist was swapped for club hits, and the guest list filled with her sorority sisters I didn't even know. Detail by detail, she was quietly turning my literary debut into a networking event for herself. I told myself to let it go. I could be professional for one single evening. Then she showed up wearing a tailored emerald blazer, the exact custom piece I had purchased for myself to wear on stage. "Oh," she smirked. "I thought we agreed to match tonight." My bad. But I knew it was entirely calculated. She had texted my fiancé days earlier pretending to buy me a matching accessory, and he told her the color of my outfit, not realizing what she was really asking. And that still wasn't the most violating part of the night. Halfway through the event, my sister stepped onto the small stage, tapped a microphone, and started delivering a speech nobody had authorized. "Thank you all so much for coming," she beamed. "It means more than you know that you're here. And wait until you hear about her next project, tracking a detective hunting her own mother in a city of brass." The room went completely silent because I hadn't told anyone about that concept. I hadn't even drafted an outline. It existed in exactly one place, in a locked, password-protected notes app on my iPad, which meant only one thing. She'd been in my apartment earlier that week, guessed my passcode, and read the vulnerable brainstorms I hadn't even pitched to my editor yet. And then she'd stood up in a crowded room and announced my intellectual property to the public, like it was hers to reveal. For 5 seconds, the only sound in the Hawthorne bookstore was the low, thudding bass of the club mix she had insisted on playing. I couldn't breathe. I just stared at Sloane. She was beaming under the track lighting, holding the microphone with both hands, soaking up the polite, deeply confused applause from her sorority friends. I looked toward the back of the room. My agent Marin was standing near the display tables. Her arms were crossed, her expression was completely unreadable, but I knew her well enough to see the tight line of her jaw. I had explicitly told Marin during our last lunch that I was suffering from terrible writer's block and had absolutely no ideas for book 2. Now my own sister was publicly pitching a high-concept fantasy thriller on my behalf. Sloane stepped down from the small stage, handing the microphone to a bookseller, and walked straight toward me. She was glowing. The emerald blazer fit her perfectly. She threw an arm around my shoulder, pressing her cold drink against my collarbone. "See?" she whispered in my ear. I got the crowd hyped up. "You're welcome." I shoved her arm off. I didn't care who was watching. "How did you know about the Brass City?" I demanded. My voice was shaking. Sloane took a sip of her cocktail. She didn't even blink. "I saw it on your desk. Don't leave your notes lying around if there's such a big secret." "It wasn't on my desk, Sloane. It was in my iPad, which requires a passcode. You probably left it unlocked," she said, waving a hand dismissively. "God, you're so paranoid. It's just a book idea. I'm trying to make you look good, but you're determined to be a victim." She turned and walked back into the crowd of her friends before I could say another word. My chest felt hollow. She was lying. My iPad locks automatically after 2 minutes. I never leave it open. Before I could follow her and drag her out of the store, a hand touched my elbow. It was Declan. My fiancé looked slightly flushed, holding 2 empty plastic cups. "Hey," Declan said, oblivious to the fact that I was hyperventilating. "Great speech, right? I didn't know you had a new book figured out." "I don't," I said, staring at him. "Declan, she broke into my iPad. That's the only way she could know about that idea. She broke into my private notes." Declan sighed. It was the same long, exhausted sigh he always used when he felt I was blowing things out of proportion with my family. "Babe, come on. Why would she break into your iPad? You probably just mentioned it in passing and forgot. You've been super stressed lately." "I didn't mention it in passing." "Well, even if you didn't, it sounded awesome," he said, rubbing my arm. "She was just trying to support you. Let's not ruin the night, okay? Your mom is already complaining about the music, and I don't want to mediate another fight." He walked away toward the bar. I stood there, wearing the exact same emerald blazer as my sister, feeling like a stranger in my own life. Declan hated conflict. He hated it so much that he was willing to let Sloane walk all over me just to keep the peace. I barely survived the rest of the night. I signed books with a stiff smile. I shook hands with women I didn't know, who kept asking me when the Brass City book was coming out. I lied and said it was a work in progress. Every time I looked across the room, Sloane was holding court, laughing, holding up a copy of my book as if she had written it herself. When we finally got home, the apartment was completely dark. Declan collapsed onto the sofa and turned on the television, instantly checking out of reality. I walked straight into my office and picked up my iPad from the charging dock. I sat at my desk, the glow of the screen illuminating the dark room. I opened the settings. I went into the screen time data. I scrolled back through the last 7 days. Tuesday, 2:15 p.m. I was at the dentist on Tuesday at 2:15 p.m. Declan was at the office. The apartment was supposed to be empty. The iPad had been active for 47 minutes. My heart hammered against my ribs. I tapped the usage bar to see the breakdown. She hadn't just opened my Notes app. The Notes app accounted for 12 minutes of the usage. The Photos app accounted for 20. My Gmail app had been open for 15 minutes. I felt physically sick. My emails. She had spent 15 minutes reading my emails. I opened my inbox, trying to figure out what she could have possibly been looking for. My correspondence with Marin, my bank statements, my wedding contracts. I walked out into the living room. Declan was half asleep on the couch. Declan, I said. He groaned. Yeah? Did Sloane come over on Tuesday? He opened one eye, looking at the ceiling. Yeah. Actually, I forgot to tell you. She texted me saying she left her favorite scarf here the weekend before, and she needed it for a date. I told her I wasn't home, but she still has the emergency spare key on her keychain. You let her come into our apartment when neither of us was here. It's just Sloane, he said, sitting up, scrubbing his face. Why are we doing this right now? I'm exhausted. She was on my iPad for 47 minutes, Declan. She read my emails. She went through my photos. Declan stared at me in the blue light of the TV. How do you even know that? Screen time data. He shook his head, a look of profound disappointment crossing his face. You're checking digital logs to catch your sister doing what? Looking at photos? You know she likes to look at the wedding mood boards. You are obsessing over nothing. She planned a massive party for you tonight and you're tracking her screen time. She stole my book pitch. I yelled. Declan stood up. I'm going to bed. I can't do this tonight. You need to let this grudge go. It's getting toxic. He left me standing in the living room. Toxic. I was the toxic one. I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen island staring at the wall until the sun came up. At 8:00 a.m., my phone buzzed on the counter. It was an email from Whitmore, the events manager at Hawthorne Bookstore. The subject line was, "Final invoice book launch." I opened it. The bookstore had provided the space for free, which was standard for author events. We only had to pay for the books we didn't sell and a small cleaning fee. That was the agreement I had signed. I scrolled down to the PDF attachment and opened it. Premium open bar $2,800, DJ equipment rental $450. 00 custom floral arrangements. 915 total due. $4,200. I stared at the number. $4,200. My advance for the novel was $10,000. After taxes and paying my agent, I took home roughly $6,000. This single party was going to wipe out almost the entirety of what I had earned for 4 years of work. I found the signature line at the bottom of the invoice. It was a digital authorization form, filled out 3 days ago. Authorized by Sloane Calloway. I picked up my phone and called my mother. She answered on the second ring, sounding remarkably chipper for someone who had stayed out until midnight. "Good morning, superstar," Harriet said. "Mom, did you know Sloane ordered an open bar for the party last night?" There was a brief pause. "Well, yes, she told me she wanted to elevate the event. It felt much more high-end than just handing out cheap white wine in plastic cups. Don't you think? She billed it to me. Mom, it's $4,000. Harriet sighed, a delicate, fluttering sound that meant I was being unreasonable. "Well, darling, you're a published author now. You have to spend money to make money. It was your party. You can't expect your sister to pay for your celebration." I didn't want the open bar. She invited 50 of her own friends and bought them top-shelf liquor on my dime. "Oh, stop exaggerating," my mother snapped, her cheerful tone vanishing instantly. "She invited a few girls from her alumni network to help fill the room. Do you know how embarrassing it would have been if no one showed up? She did you a favor. She worked incredibly hard on that party. And all you've done is complain. You need to call her and thank her." She broke into my iPad. "Mom, I am not doing this with you today," Harriet said coldly. "I'm not listening to you tear down your sister because you can't handle sharing the spotlight for one single evening. Pay the invoice. Grow up." The line went dead. I slowly lowered the phone. I looked around my quiet, empty kitchen. I was out $4,000. My private intellectual property was public knowledge. My fiancé thought I was paranoid. My mother thought I was ungrateful. Sloane had completely cornered me, operating entirely in plain sight, and she had somehow convinced everyone that she was the hero of the story. My phone buzzed again in my hand. It wasn't a text from Declan or a gloating message from Sloane. It was a text from Marin. "We need to talk. Right now. Are you at your computer?" I typed back, "Yes." "What's wrong?" A screenshot came through immediately. It was an email. I zoomed in on the image. It was an email from Sloane. She hadn't sent it to me. She had sent it directly to Marin, and she had copied the senior acquiring editor at my publishing house. I read the first line, and the blood drained completely from my face. Subject: Collaborative Pitch Book 2. From Sloane Calloway. The email was addressed to Marin and Holt, the senior editor who had championed my debut. "Dear Marin and Holt, thank you both so much for attending the launch tonight. As you know, my sister has been struggling immensely with her mental health and severe writer's block over the past 6 months. She's been incredibly anxious about fulfilling her 2-book contract. To help her meet her obligations, we've been collaborating closely on a new direction. I am thrilled to formally pitch our co-authored project, a fantasy thriller tracking a detective hunting her own mother in a city of brass. I've developed the world-building and narrative arc, which I debuted to phenomenal crowd response tonight. Since my sister is currently incapable of drafting new material, I will be stepping in as co-writer to ensure we hit your publication deadlines. I've attached a rough character map I built this week. I'd love to set up a Zoom next week to discuss restructuring her current contract to reflect our new partnership." Best. Sloane, I couldn't breathe. The air in my kitchen felt thick, like mud in my lungs. She hadn't just stolen my idea. She had diagnosed me with a mental health crisis to my own publisher, claimed my intellectual property as her own, and attempted to legally insert herself into my contract. I picked up the phone. My hands were shaking so violently I dropped it on the granite counter before picking it up again and dialing Marin's number. She answered on the first ring. "Tell me you're reading this," Marin said. Her voice was terrifyingly calm, the kind of calm that meant she was already drafting legal correspondence in her head. "Marin, I swear to God, I have never collaborated with her. I didn't even know she knew about this idea until she said it on stage tonight. She guessed my iPad passcode." "Take a breath," Marin said sharply. "I know you didn't collaborate with her. You've spent the last 3 years complaining that she doesn't even read your genre. But Holt doesn't know that. Holt is a corporate editor at a Big 5 publisher. All he sees is an email from a family member claiming his debut author is having a mental breakdown and requires a ghostwriter to fulfill a legal contract." "What did he say?" I choked out. "He forwarded it to me with a question mark. Then he called me from a cab 10 minutes ago. He's spooked. The publishing house just invested a lot of marketing money into you, and now your sister is essentially threatening to hold your second book hostage unless we pay her. I don't even have a second book yet," I yelled, the panic finally breaking through my voice. It was literally just a list of bullet points in my notes app. "I don't have a plot. I don't have chapters. There is nothing for her to co-author." "She attached a character map," Marin said grimly. "She made it up. She spent 47 minutes on my iPad on Tuesday. She must have read my bullet points, gone home, and mapped it out herself to make it look like she's been working on it." Marin went quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her tone had shifted from my advocate to my manager. "Here is the reality. Contracts get canceled over messy family disputes. Publishers hate liability. If Sloan decides to publicly claim she originated the idea for your next book, or if she takes this to social media, Holt's legal department might just drop you to avoid the headache. They can demand their advance back." My stomach bottomed out. "The advance? Marin, I spent it. Most of it went to rent and surviving the last year of edits." "I know," she said, "which is why we need to shut this down immediately. I need you in my office on Monday at 9:00 a.m. Do not reply to that email. Do not text your sister. Do not speak to her. If she reaches out, you ignore it. Understood?" "Understood. I'll handle Holt," Marin said, softening just a fraction. "We'll get through this. Just keep your head down this weekend." She hung up. I stood in the kitchen, the silence of the apartment ringing in my ears. The digital clock on the oven glowed 8:42 a.m. I walked back into the living room. Declan was still asleep, sprawled across the cushions, snoring softly. He looked completely unbothered, oblivious to the fact that my entire career was currently hanging by a thread because he gave my sister the keys to our apartment. I walked over and kicked the leg of the coffee table. Hard. Declan jumped, gasping as he woke up. He rubbed his eyes, looking around in a panic before settling on me. "What? What time is it? What's going on?" "Read this," I said, shoving my phone into his chest. He fumbled with it, squinting at the bright screen. I watched his eyes scan the email. I waited for the realization to hit. I waited for the outrage, the anger, the immediate apology for ever doubting me. Instead, he frowned, the lines in his forehead deepening. "Wait, co-author?" She pitched herself as my co-writer to my editor Declan. She told them I'm having a mental breakdown. She used the notes she stole from my iPad to make a character map. Declan slowly handed the phone back to me. He didn't look angry. He looked terrified. "Can she do that? Can she just insert herself into your contract?" "No, she can't. But she can make my publisher drop me for being a liability." Marin said they might ask for the advance back. Declan stood up, running a hand through his hair. "The advance? We used that to pay off the credit cards from last year. We don't have $10,000 to give back. If they demand that money, we won't be able to pay the venue deposit for the wedding next month." He was pacing now, not because my sister had violated my privacy, stolen my work, and humiliated me. He was pacing because it was going to impact his wedding. "She also billed me $4,000 for the open bar last night," I added, my voice dead flat. "The bookstore sent the invoice this morning." Declan stopped pacing. He stared at me, his face pale. $4,000? Are you kidding me? I signed a contract with the bookstore. If I don't pay it, they'll send me to collections. So right now, thanks to Sloan, I am in the hole for $4,000. And I might lose my publishing deal. "Okay," Declan said, holding up his hands like he was trying to calm a wild animal. "Okay, let's not overreact. Let's just talk to her." "Talk to her?" I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "Are you insane? Marin told me not to speak to her. She's actively trying to steal my career. She's your sister." Declan pleaded. "Maybe she really does think she's helping. You said it yourself, you've been super stressed. Maybe she thought if she took some of the workload off you, it would be a good thing. You know how she is, she just executes things without asking. She's a steamroller. But I don't think she's trying to ruin your life." I stared at the man I was supposed to marry in 6 months. "She told my editor I am mentally unstable." "It's just corporate speak," Declan reasoned, his voice desperate. "She's trying to build a business case for why they should hire her. Look, I'll call her. I'll talk to her. I'll explain that you don't need a co-writer, and we'll ask her to retract the email." "You are not calling her." "I have to," Declan yelled, finally losing his temper. "Because if you lose that contract, then we have to pay back the advance, and we get hit with a $4,000 bar tab. We are broke again, and I cannot go back to paying all the bills while you sit at a laptop all day hoping someone buys your book. I won't do it." The words hung in the air between us, heavy and suffocating. He had never said it out loud before. He had always played the supportive partner, smiling at the launch parties, pouring the champagne. But beneath it all, he still saw my writing as a gamble he was financing. Before I could respond, my phone vibrated in my hand. I looked down. It was a text from Harriet. "Sloan just showed me the proposal she sent to your publisher. I think it's a brilliant compromise. We both know you struggle to finish projects on your own. It will be so wonderful for you two to work together as a family brand. I've already offered to pay for a joint photo shoot next week." I read the text twice. My mother wasn't just defending Sloan's behavior. She was funding it. I set the phone face down on the cold granite. I didn't say a word. I just slid it across the island toward Declan. He picked it up, reading Harriet's message. I watched his eyes scan the screen, waiting for the disgust. I waited for him to finally see the absolute insanity of what my family was doing to me. Instead, his shoulders dropped. The tension visibly left his body. "Okay," he exhaled, tossing the phone back onto the counter. "Okay. See, this is what I was talking about. It's not a hostile takeover, babe. Your mom is backing it. A family brand. That has a ring to it. Publishers love that kind of marketable angle, right? Like those sisters who write the rom-coms together." I stared at him. I couldn't feel my hands. "Declan," I said, my voice barely a whisper, "I don't write rom-coms. I write thrillers. And I wrote it by myself." She didn't write a single word of it. She didn't even read it until she ruined the unboxing. "But she has the idea for the next one." he argued, stepping closer, lowering his voice into that soothing, placating tone he used when I was being unreasonable. You said it yourself, you have writer's block. She has an outline. She has your mom willing to pay for marketing. And more importantly, she has the editor's attention. If you just play along, you keep the contract. We keep the advance. The wedding is paid for. He was looking at me like I was the problem to be solved, like I was the stubborn obstacle standing in the way of our financial security. You want me to let my sister legally take half my career so we can pay the caterer next month? I want you to be practical. He snapped, running his hands over his face. I am drowning here. Do you know how much pressure is on me? My salary pays the rent. My salary pays the car lease. We are scraping by so you can chase this dream, and now you have a lifeline right in front of you and you're rejecting it out of pride. It's not pride. It's fraud. It's my work. It's money, Declan said coldly. And we need it. There it was. The absolute unfiltered truth. He didn't care about the 4 years I spent hunched over my laptop at 5 a.m. before working my retail shifts. He didn't care about the rejection emails, the revisions, the crying on the bathroom floor. He just saw a paycheck that was about to vanish. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. The hollow feeling in my chest just expanded, freezing everything solid. Give me your keys, I said. Declan frowned. What? Your keys? You gave Sloane your spare to let herself into my apartment. I want them. Babe, don't do this. Give me the keys, Declan. He dug into his sweatpants pocket and threw his keyring onto the counter. It clattered against the granite. The spare silver key was missing. She still had it. I turned around, walked into our bedroom, and pulled my duffel bag from the top of the closet. I didn't pack meticulously. I threw in underwear, a pair of jeans, some t-shirts, my toiletries. I unplugged my laptop charger. I grabbed my iPad. I stuffed the emerald blazer into a plastic dry cleaning bag and laid it on top. Declan stood in the doorway, his arms crossed. Where are you going? You're acting like a child. I'm going to fix my life, I said, zipping the bag. And since you think my career is just a shared asset to fund your lifestyle, I'm doing it somewhere else. If you walk out that door right now, we are done, he said. His voice was shaking, a mix of anger and panic. I am not doing this dramatic back and forth. I am not marrying someone who creates chaos out of thin air. I picked up the duffel bag and hoisted the strap over my shoulder. I walked right past him. I didn't even look at his face. I'll send someone for the rest of my things, I said. I walked out the front door and let it slam shut behind. The hallway was dead quiet. I took the elevator down to the lobby, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. It was Saturday morning. The sun was glaringly bright when I stepped out onto the sidewalk. I had nowhere to go. My mother's house was obviously out of the question. My closest friends from college all lived out of state, and the few local friends I had were currently nursing hangovers from the open bar I was apparently paying for. I pulled out my phone and checked my bank account. Checking. $1,412. Savings. $400. The invoice from Hawthorne Bookstore was $4,200. I needed to talk to Whitmore. I needed to physically look him in the eye and explain the situation before he ran my credit card on file, the one tied to an account that would instantly overdraw and decline. I walked 3 blocks to the subway station and caught the downtown train. The ride took 40 minutes. I spent the entire time staring at my reflection in the dark glass of the train window. I looked exhausted. There were dark circles under my eyes, and my hair was thrown into a messy knot. I didn't look like a newly published author. I looked like a ghost. Hawthorne Bookstore was a beautiful, independent shop nestled in a historic brick building. It had floor-to-ceiling windows, dark mahogany shelves, and that perfect, comforting smell of old paper and roasted coffee. Yesterday, it had been the site of my greatest achievement. Today, it felt like a crime scene. I pushed through the heavy glass doors. The morning rush was mild, just a few people browsing the new releases. I walked straight past the front displays toward the small cafe in the back where the events office was located. Before I reached the cafe, I stopped dead in my tracks. There was a display table right in the middle of the main aisle, a prime piece of real estate reserved for local authors and staff picks. My book was stacked neatly in a pyramid. But it wasn't just my book. Sitting next to the stack was a professionally printed placard, framed in sleek black metal. It read, Staff Pick, a chilling debut by local sisters. Catch their next collaborative thriller coming soon. Tucked into the pages of every single copy were thick, glossy bookmarks. I pulled one out. It was emerald green. On the front, it had a graphic of a brass city skyline. On the back, it read The Brass City Project, a new fantasy thriller by Sloane, and my name was there, but it was printed in a font half the size of hers. A cold sweat broke out across the back of my neck. She hadn't just emailed my publisher. She had come here this morning. Oh, hi, a bright voice said. I jumped, dropping the bookmark. A young employee wearing an apron with a name tag that read Cora was standing there, holding a stack of hardcovers. She smiled warmly at me. It's so good to see you again, Cora said. Your sister was just here about an hour ago. She brought us all these amazing promotional materials for the new series. We put them out right away. She was here? I asked, my voice cracking. Cora nodded enthusiastically. Yeah. She's so nice. She even signed the remaining stock for us. Cora gestured to the top book on the pyramid. I reached out with a trembling hand and flipped open the cover to the title page. There, right beneath my printed name, was a signature in thick, black Sharpie. Sloane Calloway, co-creator. She had defaced my books. She had physically written her name in permanent ink on the title pages of my solo debut. Where is Whitmore? I asked, looking up at Cora. I couldn't hide the panic in my eyes anymore. Cora's smile faltered, sensing the immediate shift in the atmosphere. He's in his office, she said slowly. Is everything okay? I need to speak with him right now. I didn't wait for her to answer. I marched past the cafe and knocked sharply on the frosted glass door of the events office. Without waiting for a response, I opened it. Whitmore looked up from his computer. He was a man in his late 50s, usually jovial and relaxed, but his face tightened when he saw me. He took off his reading glasses. I was just about to call you, Whitmore said, his tone entirely professional and entirely cold. Whitmore, I am so sorry, I started, shutting the door behind me. I saw the invoice this morning. I didn't authorize that open bar. I didn't authorize the DJ. My sister did that without my permission. Whitmore sighed. leaning back in his chair. She signed the authorization form on Wednesday, acting as your event coordinator. She used the same email thread you and I had been using to arrange the logistics. I had no reason to believe she wasn't speaking for you. She hijacked my email, I said. She broke into my iPad. Whitmore, she is sabotaging me. Look out there. She signed my books. She didn't write a single word of that novel, and she signed her name on the title page. Whitmore held up a hand to stop me. I appreciate that you're dealing with a family dispute, but that is not my concern. My concern is the $4,200 owed to my vendors. The florist and the equipment rental company need to be paid today. I already ran the card on file for the deposit. The card declined, I guessed, feeling the blood rush to my ears. It did, he confirmed, his voice hard. So I need a new method of payment, right now, or I will have to contact our legal counsel. We are a small business. We do not comp private cocktail parties. I don't have it, I whispered. The shame was absolute. It coated my throat. My advance is gone. I have $1,400 to my name. Whitmore stared at me. The disappointment in his eyes was worse than the anger. Yesterday, he had introduced me to a crowd of people as a rising star in the literary world. Today, I was a broke liability begging for mercy in his back office. I can give you the $1,400, I pleaded. I can transfer it right now, and I will set up a payment plan for the rest. I swear to you, I will pay every single cent. Just please don't send this to collections. Please don't tell my publisher. If they find out I'm defaulting on a bookstore invoice, they'll drop me. Whitmore picked up a pen and tapped it slowly against his desk. He looked out the frosted glass toward the store floor. Your sister offered to pay it, he said quietly. I froze. What? When she came in this morning to drop off those bookmarks. I pulled her aside and mentioned the card had declined. I assumed it was a bank error. She told me you were having severe financial difficulties. She offered to write me a check for the full amount. My stomach turned over violently. She was playing every single angle. She was creating the debt and then buying the debt so she could own me. If she paid Whitmore, she held the ultimate leverage. She could go to my publisher and say she was financially supporting my entire operation. Did you take it? I asked, barely able to breathe. No, Whitmore said. I told her the contract is in your name, and I needed to speak with you first. But I am running a business here. I need to be paid. If you can't pay it, I will call her back. Do not call her. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped it on the floor. I scooped it up, wiping the screen on my jeans, and opened my banking app. I had $1,412. I opened my credit card app. The card was nearly maxed out from the wedding deposits Declan had put on it, but there was exactly $3,000 of available credit left. If I used it, my utilization would hit 100%. My credit score would tank. Declan would get an alert because he was an authorized user. I didn't care. Declan wasn't my problem anymore. Can I put $3,000 on a credit card and wire you the rest from my checking? I asked. Whitmore nodded slowly. He pushed a small credit card terminal across the desk. I tapped my card. It beeped. Approved. Then I opened my banking app and initiated a wire transfer for $1,200. It left me with $212 in my checking account. I was completely wiped out. The safety net I had spent 4 years building was gone in 60 seconds. It's done, I said, showing him the confirmation screen. Whitmore looked at his computer, confirming the receipt. He let out a long breath, some of the tension leaving his face, but the warmth didn't return. I'll have my staff pull those bookmarks and replace the defaced stock with clean copies, he said. We'll eat the cost of the ruined books, but I have to be honest with you. We won't be able to host you for future events. It felt like he had reached across the desk and slapped. Hawthorne was the most prestigious indie bookstore in the city. Losing them meant losing local distribution, staff recommendations, and credibility. I understand, I said, swallowing the lump of pure grief in my throat. I stood up, picking up my duffel bag. I walked out of the office, out of the bookstore, and back onto the street. The sun felt too bright, harsh, and unforgiving. I had $212. I had no apartment, no fiancé, and a sister who was actively dismantling my life piece by piece while my mother cheered her on. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was Marin. I answered it, putting it to my ear as I walked aimlessly down the block. Tell me you are not on Instagram right now, Marin said. She wasn't using her manager voice anymore. She sounded stressed. I'm not on anything. I just spent my entire life savings paying off the invoice Sloan left at the bookstore. What did she do? She posted a reel 20 minutes ago. It's a video of her at Hawthorne, showing off the staff pick table and signing your books. The caption tags Holt, our publishing imprint, and several major bookstagrammers. She announced the Brass City project. I stopped walking. People bumped into my shoulders on the sidewalk, but I couldn't move. She announced it. She called it a 2-book deal. She told her followers that she and you are officially co-writing a fantasy duology, and that her solo debut will be coming next. Solo debut? I echoed, the words sounding foreign in my mouth. She's trying to use your platform to launch her own career, Marin said grimly. She's using your publisher, your audience, and your concepts to build herself an author platform overnight. And because she tagged the imprint, the marketing team at the publishing house is freaking out. They don't know if this is a guerrilla marketing campaign you launched without their permission, or if you've gone rogue and sold the rights to a relative. Marin, you have to tell Holt it's a lie. Tell them my sister is having a psychotic break. I did, Marin said quietly. I called Holt 10 minutes ago. I explained that you are being harassed by a family member. I told him we are considering legal action. And Marin paused. I could hear the faint sound of traffic in the background on her end. She was walking, too. Holt said the publisher's legal department is getting involved on Monday, she said. They are placing a freeze on your contract. A freeze? They won't distribute any more copies of the debut. They are halting the second print run. Until they have a written, legally binding guarantee that Sloan has no claim to your intellectual property, they won't touch you. They don't want to print books if someone else is going to claim a percentage of the royalties and sue them, but she doesn't have a claim. I yelled into the phone, drawing stares from a woman walking a golden retriever. I lowered my voice, pressing my forehead against the cool brick wall of a deli. She broke into my iPad. She stole a paragraph of notes. That isn't a legal claim. In publishing, the threat of a lawsuit is enough to kill a contract, Marin explained, her voice softening with pity. They aren't going to spend money defending you in court. It's cheaper for them to just cancel the deal and walk away. So what do I do? You need a lawyer, Marin said. Not a literary agent. You need an intellectual property attorney to send her a cease and desist immediately. You need to terrify her into taking down that video and sending a formal retraction to Holt. If you can get a signed retraction by Monday morning, I might be able to save the second print run. A lawyer. I closed my eyes. I had $212 in my checking account. I couldn't afford a lawyer. I couldn't even afford a hotel room for the night. I don't have the money for a lawyer. Marin, silence on the line. Then, what about Declan? He's a consultant, right? Can he cover a retainer? I left him, I said. Saying it out loud made it real. The finality of it settled heavy in my gut. He wanted me to agree to Sloane's demands so we wouldn't lose the advance for the wedding. I took my bag and left an hour ago. Marin cursed softly under her breath. Okay, don't panic. Let me make some calls. I have a friend who does IP law. Maybe I can get him to draft a standard C&D as a favor. Just stay off social media. Don't engage with her followers. And for the love of God, do not text her. Anything you write to her, she can use as evidence that you two are communicating about the project. I won't. I promised. Where are you staying? I don't know yet. Figure it out. Keep your phone on. I'll call you when I have something. She hung up. I lowered my phone. I was completely unmoored. I started walking again, pulling the heavy duffel bag up higher on my shoulder. I walked without a destination, just putting distance between myself and the bookstore. 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed again. I ignored it, assuming it was Declan realizing I was actually gone. It buzzed a second time, then a third. I pulled it out. It wasn't Declan. It was a text from an unknown number. Hey, it's Petra from Hawthorne Bookstore. Cora gave me your number from the emergency contact sheet for events. I stared at the screen. I didn't remember a Petra, but there had been half a dozen employees working the launch party. Another text came through. I overheard your conversation with Whitmore. I was in the stockroom. I'm so sorry I'm texting you out of nowhere, but I think you need to know what your sister did with the acoustic guitarist you hired for the launch. My brow furrowed. The acoustic guitarist. I had hired a local musician, a guy who played classical Spanish guitar, to provide background music for the quiet Q&A I had originally planned. When Sloane hijacked the itinerary and brought in a DJ to play club hits, the guitarist had been paid and sent home early. I had felt terrible about it, but Sloane had literally shoved him out the back door. I typed back, what did she do? The response took a minute to arrive. I watched the little typing bubble appear and disappear. Finally, the text came through. She didn't just send him home. She took his clipboard, the one he used to collect email addresses for his mailing list. I saw her scanning the whole list of names and emails into her phone before she threw his clipboard in the alley dumpster. I stopped breathing. The mailing list. My publisher had specifically asked me to build a newsletter. For the last 2 years, every time I did a reading, every time I went to a local library, I brought a clipboard and asked people to sign up for my mailing list. That list had over 3,000 verified emails of dedicated readers, reviewers, and local booksellers. I had brought my own clipboard to the launch last night, but in the chaos of Sloane's hostile takeover, I had left it on the signing table. I thought I had just misplaced it. I thought I had packed it in a different box. I typed frantically. Are you sure it was his clipboard? Was it a wooden one with a silver clip? Petra's reply was instant. Yes, that's the one. She took pictures of every single page. I'm sorry to be the one to tell you. I dropped my head back against the brick wall and stared up at the sliver of blue sky between the tall buildings. She had my readers. She had my direct line to the people who bought my books. My phone vibrated in my hand, a new notification popping up at the top of the screen. It was an email alert. The sender was Sloane Calloway Books. The subject line was, Welcome to the Brass City. Exclusive news on my next co-authored thriller. She had already imported the list. She was actively emailing my entire fan base, pitching my stolen idea, using the very contacts I had spent years cultivating. She was branding herself as the driving force behind my career, and she was doing it directly to the people who mattered most. I opened the email. It was formatted beautifully. She must have spent hours on it. There was a professional headshot of her, not me, just her, wearing my emerald blazer. The text read, To our amazing readers, thank you so much for supporting my sister's debut last night. As many of you know, writing can be a grueling, isolating process. Lately, my sister has been struggling with the pressures of the industry, and it's taken a toll on her well-being. That's why I'm stepping in. I am so excited to announce that we are joining forces. I will be taking the lead on our next project, The Brass City. I didn't read the rest. I couldn't. I hit the lock button on my phone, plunging the screen into darkness. She wasn't just stealing the book. She was stealing my identity as a writer. She was positioning herself as the savior, the healthy, capable sister rescuing the fragile, broken author. A horn blared loudly from the street, snapping me out of my spiral. I looked up. A dark blue sedan was idling at the curb right in front of me. The passenger window rolled down. Get in, a voice said. I blinked, my eyes focusing on the driver. It was Marin. She wasn't dressed in her usual sharp office attire. She was wearing a faded college sweatshirt and sunglasses. Marin, how did you know where I was? You shared your location with me 3 years ago when we went to that conference in Chicago so we wouldn't lose each other at the hotel bar, she said, popping the trunk latch. Put your bag in the back. Get in. I walked to the rear of the car, tossed my duffel bag into the trunk and slammed it shut. I pulled the passenger door open and slid into the leather seat. The air conditioning blasted against my face, freezing the sweat on my forehead. Marin didn't say hello. She just put the car in drive and pulled away from the curb. I got the email, Marin said, keeping her eyes on the road. Holt got it too. He was on your mailing list. I know, I whispered, staring out the window at the passing storefronts. Petra from the bookstore just texted me. Sloane stole the physical clipboard last night. She scanned the pages. It's a GDPR violation, Marin said clinically, turning onto a wider avenue. She's emailing people without their opt-in consent. But that's a fine, not a fix. We have a bigger problem. I turned my head to look at her. Bigger than losing my contract and my readers? Marin glanced at me, her mouth set in a grim line. She reached over to the center console, picked up a thick manila envelope, and dropped it into my lap. I told you I was going to call my IP lawyer friend, she said. I did. I asked him to look into filing an emergency injunction to stop her from using your title and concepts. And? I asked, resting my hand on the envelope. And he ran a trademark search first, just standard protocol to make sure the title The Brass City was clear before we started drafting legal threats. The temperature in the car seemed to plummet. I stared down at the blank manila envelope. My fingers felt numb as I slid the flap open and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was a printout from the United States Patent and Trademark Office database. At the top, highlighted in yellow, was the trademark, the brass city. Beneath it, the filing date, Wednesday, October 12th, 3 days ago, the day after she broke into my iPad. And beneath that, the owner of the trademark, Harriet Calloway. Your mother filed the trademark, Marin said quietly, stopping at a red light. She didn't just fund the photo shoot. She paid a corporate filing service to legally register your title under her own name. I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. My own mother. Sloan isn't just acting out, Marin continued, her voice devoid of its usual managerial detachment. It sounded incredibly sad. She and your mother formed an LLC on Thursday. They are legally claiming ownership of your intellectual property, and they have the paperwork to back it up. If we fight this, it won't just be a cease and desist. It's going to be a federal lawsuit against your own family. I stared at the yellow highlighter on the page. I stared at the name, Harriet Calloway. For a long time, the only sound in the car was the hum of the air conditioning and the rhythmic clicking of Marin's turn signal. We stopped at a red light. I traced the edge of the printed paper with my thumb. Do we have to fight it? I asked. Marin turned her head, lowering her sunglasses. What do they actually own, Marin? Really look at it. They own a title. They own a log line about a city of brass. And they own an LLC. They own your intellectual property, Marin said, her voice tight. No, I said, and for the first time in 48 hours, the crushing weight on my chest began to lift. They own a bulleted list from my iPad. There is no outline. There are no chapters, no character bibles, no lore. I literally made up the phrase, City of Brasses, on Tuesday while I was waiting in the dentist's office. I don't even know what it means. Marin stared at me. Sloan can't write, I continued, the words coming faster now. She dropped out of her communications degree because she couldn't handle 3-page essays. My mother hasn't read a book since Oprah recommended Wild. They formed a legal entity to sell a manuscript they cannot physically produce. The light turned green. Marin didn't step on the gas. The car behind us honked, a sharp blare that finally made her move her foot, pulling us through the intersection and over to the shoulder of the road. She put the car in park and turned completely toward me. If they sign a contract with Holt, I said, they get an advance. They'll spend it immediately. Harriet thinks you have to spend money to make money. They'll buy tailored blazers and host launch parties for a book that doesn't exist. What happens in 12 months when the delivery deadline hits and they hand over a blank Word document? A slow, razor-sharp smile spread across Marin's face. It was the smile that made editors terrified of her during negotiations. Breach of contract, Marin whispered. Holt's legal department would demand the advance back in full. If the LLC can't pay, they get sued. Harriet's assets would be on the line, so let's give it to them. Marin laughed. It was a sharp, barking sound of pure disbelief. She pulled her phone out of her pocket. You're serious. You want to officially surrender the rights. I want to legally sever myself from Sloan Calloway Books LLC. I want to put in writing to Holt that I will not be co-authoring the project, and that I release all claims to the title, the concept, and the characters to my sister. I wish her the absolute best in delivering the 90,000-word manuscript by her contractual deadline. Holt will drop you, Marin warned, her tone sobering. He'll freeze your debut permanently to avoid the family mess, and he'll sign them for the new project because he's a corporate idiot who likes flashy marketing. You'll lose whatever royalties were left on the first book. You'll be starting over from absolute zero. I have $212 in my checking account, I said. I don't have an apartment. I don't have a fiancé. I'm already at zero. Let them drown in the brass city. Marin didn't hesitate. She opened her email app and started typing. We drafted the legal release right there on the shoulder of the road. We used clear, unambiguous language. I was stepping away due to creative differences. I renounced all ownership of the trademarked material. The project belonged entirely to Sloan and Harriet. I hit send. That night, I slept on Marin's couch. For the first time in months, I didn't wake up with a knot of anxiety in my stomach. I didn't check Declan's location to see if he was bringing Sloan to our apartment. I just slept. The fallout was swift and perfectly bureaucratic. Holt's legal department accepted my release within 48 hours. They formally canceled my second book option. 3 days later, Marin forwarded me a press release from Publishers Marketplace. Holt had signed Sloan Calloway Books LLC to a mid-6-figure 2-book deal based on the viral success of her bookstore launch and the inherited mailing list. Declan texted me exactly once, a screenshot of the Publishers Marketplace announcement. You walked away from $500,000 because of your pride. Have a nice life. I didn't reply. I blocked his number, blocked his emails, and blocked every single person he knew. Marin let me stay in her guest room for 3 weeks. I found a job at a small bakery in Brooklyn that opened at 5 a.m., which meant I was done by 1 p.m. I rented a tiny drafty studio apartment in Queens. It had a mattress on the floor, a folding table for a desk, and a coffee maker. It was the most beautiful place I had ever lived. I sat at that folding table every afternoon and I wrote. I didn't write about brass cities or detectives. I wrote about 2 sisters, one who consumed everything she touched, and one who finally learned how to walk away. The words bled out of me. There was no writer's block. There was just the pure, unadulterated truth, dressed up in a fictional coastal town. We sold it under a new pen name. Marin took it to an editor at a rival publishing house, a woman who despised Holt and his flashy, empty acquisitions. She bought it for enough money to buy me a real bed and a desk that didn't fold in half. 14 months later, it was a Tuesday morning. I was sitting at my real desk, drinking coffee, when my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but the area code was my old neighborhood. I answered it on a whim. Hello? It's me, Harriet said. Her voice didn't have the delicate, fluttering condescension it used to carry. She sounded breathless. She sounded old. I set my coffee mug down. Hi, Mom. You need to help us, she said, her words rushing together in a panicked stream. You have to help your sister. Holt is suing the LLC. They're trying to pierce the corporate veil and come after my house. I leaned back in my chair, looking out the window at the quiet Queen Street. Why is he suing you? The deadline. Harriet sobbed. We missed the delivery deadline. Sloan hired a ghostwriter, but the girl was an absolute nightmare. She demanded an outline and character arcs, and Sloan didn't have them. So the girl quit. We tried to get an extension, But Holt read the 20 pages Sloane tried to write herself and he canceled the contract. They want the advance back. And you don't have it. We used it for marketing. Harriet cried, her voice echoing the exact logic she had used to justify the $4,000 bar tab. We bought social media ads. We did a branding tour. We paid for the LLC filings and the lawyers to protect the trademark. It's gone. You have to talk to your agent. You have to write the book for us. We can still submit it if you just write it. She was begging me to save the very thing she had stolen. She wanted me to bleed over a keyboard for a year to pay off the tailored blazers and the open bars. You're a published author now, Mom, I said softly, the words tasting like sweet, cold water. You have to spend money to make money. Grow up. I hung up. I blocked the number. That afternoon, a delivery driver knocked on my door. He handed me a medium-sized cardboard box sealed with heavy packing tape. The return address belonged to my new publisher. I carried the box over to my desk. I didn't invite a crowd. I didn't set up a camera for Instagram. I didn't pour a glass of red wine. I was entirely alone. The apartment was quiet, save for the hum of the refrigerator. I picked up a pair of scissors and sliced through the tape. I opened the cardboard flaps. Inside, nestled in bubble wrap, were 5 pristine hardcover copies of my new novel. The cover was dark, brooding, and beautiful. My new name was printed in sharp silver foil. I reached into the box and pulled out the top copy. I ran my hand over the smooth, undamaged dust jacket. I opened the cover, listening to the crisp crack of the spine, and inhaled the scent of fresh paper and ink. No one screamed. No one snatched it from my hands. I sat in the quiet of my own life, and I held my milestone.